the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple, his god of Babylonian, and put in the treasure house of his god. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, the chief of his court officials, to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Among them were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. The chief official gave them new names to them. Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. So that's the start of the story of Daniel. We'll look, of course, further as we go along in today's sermon, but today I hope we can look at the faith of Daniel. So that's the title of today's message. It is the faith of Daniel. So we will start to look at this story at the start about Daniel's ministry. And what we're reading today is the start of his ministry and his faith. And so what we know about Daniel is that he was a very, very important person inside of the Bible, right? One of the great prophets in the Bible. And one of the reasons why was because he was able to really show faith, and he kept firm, and in fact he even excelled, I should say, really during his time. And that time was probably one of the most difficult periods in Israelite history, right? So it wasn't an easy time, right, when it comes to the Israelite history. But for Daniel, right, Daniel was still able to keep faith, keep firm and pure, and he even excelled during one of the most difficult times. And so, we have to really self-examine that, because often, how are we, amidst the fallen world, amidst the hard times, really, that we live inside of the world, we tend to fall, right? Very similar to, the direction of the world. But as we looked at, in the message of Deborah, right, last time, it is in crisis that there is an opportunity to stand. And we do see Daniel being another person like that. He was able to stand firm and even excel during a very, very difficult time. So let me explain this difficult time period for you a little bit, first of all. So what kind of time period was it? So what happened was, remember that there was the golden age of King David, right? And so this was the golden age of King David. Even after him, it was still a high point inside of Israelite society with King Solomon. But then, one by one, as the generations went further and further and further on, we see idolatry and sin begin to pervade the Israelite community at the time. And so, as that progressed further and further down into generations, this really split and decimated the tribes. They split into two even. And then finally, at one point in time, they were just completely overtaken. So this very, very great nation under King David that was very, really to God's glory, that, was such a great nation at the time, had hit its golden age, but, went down to, really fallen down to the depths, and it was Babylon. Right? And so we read that here about Babylon, right? We read about Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. So Babylon had overtaken Israel, and what they did really was they actually forced the Israelites out of their home in Judea, and then brought them and took them captive and brought them over to them, right? To their main city, their main capital, right? And And something it records here, really in verse 2, is that they carried out all the articles, all the things of the temple, right? And so, if you know a little bit about the Israelite, faith and custom and culture, then of course the temple was the center. So, if there is the holy nation, right, then in the holy nation, the center of that is the holy temple. And inside the temple, they had, very holy things, right? Of course, inside the temple to keep their scrolls and perform sacrifices, and the Jewish leaders and so on and so forth, in order to keep a very holy temple. So what the Babylonians did was they carried off all those holy temple things and carried them off, right? And so basically, what was left back in their hometown, right, in Judea, in Jerusalem, was a temple that was pretty much decimated and destroyed, and a shadow of what it was once before. Now, really that holy place that it once was, right? And so it was really the downfall we can see of the Israelite period. Now, this wasn't the first time, of course, that the Israelites had experienced hardship. If you look in the Old Testament, it's actually very frequent. They fall into sin, and we do see that they fall into issues, right? That they have hardships and difficulties. And the exile in Babylon, when they were slaves to the Babylonians, can be compared to when they were when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, right? And so this is during the time of Moses. And so, what happened during that time? Well, through Moses, God delivered them from that, but we see the Israelites are over and over again very often like this. God's people can be like this. We can be like this. This isn't just a story of people long ago, but this is us. We go into the world and we tend to slip up inside of the world and slip up again and again. And we can be taken captive as slaves to Satan and the sin of the world. This is really not just the history of Israel, but what do we say about Israel and the Old Testament? That is God's people, right? That is God's people. That is our ancestors, right? So when you look at the Israelites in the Old Testament, that is our ancestors. That is God's people. So this is not just a story of long ago, but this is God's people. And God's people in the history of the church, this happens very often. We fall asleep, we get taken captive into the decadence of the world, right? And look how often we do that as believers. We fall into sin and greed and lust and our pride and many, many things like that. In this day and age, what I really think is really the decadence of this world, you can just look at the night culture inside of the world that we live in now. All the things that happen at night, the drugs and the sex and the drinking and all these things that happens at night. And so, we stay up late, right? And that's how really a lot of young people are. You stay up late thinking, I'm not going to fall into all of that, but really it is at nighttime in the darkness that people really fall into those things. And so that's why we can wake up in the morning, right? We really have to wake up in the morning. Anyways, you see even believers fall into this decadence of sin. But what we need to know, and as we can see really throughout the course of history, whether it be the Old Testament or whether it be now, that's not going to last, right? I mean, that's the conclusive nature of sin that the Bible teaches us, right? And so the Bible teaches us that sin is not something that just lasts and remains. All the kings of the world that built up these sinful, empires, even they fall. Anyone that falls into greed and sin and all of those kinds of things, it just fades into the dust of history. So it will not last. And so the point is, will we stand strong, right? Are we going to be the faithful ones that are going to wake up during even hard times? It was a very, very difficult time period in Israelite history, but will we have faith, be awake to all the things that are going around us, and really stand firmly like Daniel here? And so what happens in this story is that in the start of Daniel's ministry is that Nebuchadnezzar, right, the king of Babylon, wants the Israelite nobility to come and then be trained inside of the palace, right? And so they want to train these Israelites inside of the palace. So this is very interesting. It's the method of the world, I think, in terms of how they can really integrate. It's like a colony, right? That's what Israel is. There's Babylon has taken over this colony of Israel, so they're thinking, like the king, like, how can I integrate this colony I've just taken over? How can I integrate these people into, a more powerful nation like this, right? And so what they think in terms of the method is, let's take a hold of the Israelite nobility, right? So in other words, let's take hold of the Israelite elite, right? The elite ones within the Israelite society. Let's integrate them. We'll even change their names, right? That's what we read in verse 7. They changed Daniel and his 3 friends. They change all of their names to that, right? And so if we integrate them, then maybe we can grab hold of them. And it's something to think about in this day and age as well, too. It is, taking the ones who are leading others, right? The Christian leaders, for example, we put it in that way. Take hold of them, let them fall into greed and decadence and sin and lust and all those other kinds of things, and then, everybody else, integrate them into the decadence and the sin of the world as well also. And so let's train them. Let's train them into the language, literature, food. It could be like that for all of us as well too. Let's be trained in the world in all of the culture, right? The culture of what the world of Babylon is. And so when it comes to this, when it comes to like language, literature, food, they want to do all kinds of things to integrate that. It must be really nice and good, actually, when you think about it. It's very, knowledgeable. And the food, if you eat the food, the royal food, then it's good food, right? I mean, it's got to be good food, if you're going to be eating in the palace. And so, so among the people that they're trying to train is Daniel, his 3 friends, and they're trying to do this. So let's continue on and read. We'll look at Daniel chapter 1, and in verse 8 through 10. Daniel chapter 1, verse 8 through 10. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord, the king, who has assigned you food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. So we see that this very, very important, the first thing I want to see is this very important aspect of Daniel's faith that the Bible records. And so the Bible uses this word, it uses the word resolve, right? And so in verse 8, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself. So the Bible uses this word resolve. And so when we take a look at Daniel's faith, something we really see inside of him is this resolve not to eat it, right? Not to eat this food. Now, you might be looking at this and maybe saying, hey, that's not such a big deal. I mean, compared to this day and age with many, many kinds of sins that we have, to just not eat, to eat some food, right? Some particular food is not such a big deal, right? But we see that that's not necessarily the situation of Daniel back then. It's not that we can exactly, try to compare it to ourselves. We have to really look at the context and then apply it to ourselves. We can't just like directly take that scenario and then apply it to ourselves, right? And so, what is the context really for this refusal? So the context for this refusal is pretty clear. If you look at verse 10, it's that if you are looking worse, right? And so if you're just eating regular food and you're not eating the good meat and the palace food, then you're probably going to look more weaker over time, more shabbier than the other people. And if you look shabbier than the other people, then, it's a place of death, essentially. The king, do you think it's just the head of the supervisor here? No, it's going to be the head of Daniel and his 3 friends too. So this is talking really about, the king, which is, a very scary situation back then. It is the place of death even before this. So it's not really just a small issue, right? This is a very, very big issue when it comes to this. And so you'll die, basically, if you go against the palace. However, inside of the Israelite law, and you can read about it all in the Old Testament, it outlines, basically, like you can eat this food, but you can't eat that food, and this and that. And it's very detailed about the food, right? And so, there is the law of the palace, right? The culture and law, I guess, of what is acceptable inside the palace, right? So, when you look at what is acceptable inside of the palace, it is, being a part of, eating this food and being a part of this culture, right? And that's what's acceptable, right, inside of the palace. That's what's acceptable into the culture of the world. But there's that culture, right? There's that law, that culture of the world. But then there is such thing as the law of God, right? The law of God. And so the law of God was given, right, in turn to them, right? And for Daniel, he regards the law of God, right, more than the law of the culture of the world, right? And so, yeah, like I said, you might think, why are they imposing this kind of law that you have to eat the royal food and so on and so forth? Well, in that era, in particular, to really stand tall as a palace, right, you have to show this image, right, that you're a very strong palace. And so, if you work at the palace, then the people at the palace should look, dressed nicely and look well and so on and so forth, to kind of put on this image, right? And so this oppressive empire, the Babylonians, they want to maintain the image. And that is how the world is, right? That is why there is such thing as the culture and the decadence of this world. There's something where we have to take care of the image, right? Take care of our image, take care of our standards. And so we see that. And so, but how is Daniel? Daniel, he refuses to just be fallen in that. He refuses just to be fallen in the culture of the world, and he refuses it in order to keep, instead, the image of God. Right? The image of God. Rather than the image of the world, he thinks more about the image of God, the holiness, the integrity, and the purity before God. They want to keep themselves, Daniel and his 3 friends, want to keep themselves upright before God instead of the world. And so we should do this as well too as believers. We easily compromise, right? When we should walk upright, right, we fall, right? We fall into the sins of the world. And I think that was probably one of the hardest things for me, I think, when I started walking this path of faith. Really, when I started walking this path of faith, I was in college, and so you can imagine, what college life is like, right? There is such thing as your social circles, what is acceptable, culturally among your social circles of friends. There is, quote unquote, the law of the world, and if you don't maintain the image of the law of the world, then it seems like you're going to be outcast. Maybe you really feel like it's like the death of you inside of society or something like this. And it sometimes feels like that in that way. And so I still remember some of the first questions I asked my Bible study teachers and my pastors was, I read the Bible and the Bible keeps telling, we have to keep pure and we should avoid sin and all these kinds of things, but it's very, very difficult to do that within social circles, right, inside of this world, with friends and keeping our integrity and all that. And so this was not an easy position for Daniel, right? I mean, it was really talking about his life or death situation for him. It wasn't an easy situation for him, but we do see that he remains firm. So let's continue on and read. We'll read Daniel chapter 1, verse 11 through 14. Daniel chapter 1, verse 11 through 14. Daniel said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearances with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to test this. He agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. So the official, right, who thinks he's going to die if they look shabby and weak in the palace, right? But Daniel, it's going against Daniel, who wants to keep faith inside of the word, inside of the law, right? The word of God and the law. So what Daniel does is he says, well, how about this, right? Let's just test for 10 days, right? Daniel says, let's just test for 10 days. If we just eat vegetables and water, so that's permissible, right, within the law, to eat vegetables and water. So there's all this palace food, but they can't really eat the palace foods, particularly the meat, which is defiled, right? But the vegetables inside of the palace are okay. So let's just eat vegetables and water, and let's see if we'll be healthy like this, right? So when we look at how Daniel is and what he is keeping inside of his spirit, right? More than just like talking about a situation of food, that's not what we're talking about today, a situation of food. But what we're talking about is a situation of his spirit and his faith, right? And so for Daniel, there is something very similar to Moses, right? So Moses was the same way. Remember, Moses was in the papyrus basket, got lifted up by the princess, grew up 40 years inside the palace. He could have lived his life as a prince inside of his palace, right? Enjoying all the pleasures and joys and decadence and sin and all the pleasures of the desirable things of the world he could have enjoyed as the prince of the palace. But if he did, he would have just been lost inside of the dust of the history when it came to that as well too. We wouldn't even know who Moses was, and he wouldn't have been a person of faith. But what we see that Moses did was that he willingly endured suffering for God's people, with God's people, and God blessed his life and helped him lead God's people out of Egypt, right? He was faithful. So Daniel is like that as well too. He could have enjoyed all the things and all the pleasures of the world, but instead he willingly, with faith, lived for God, right? Willingly, God really blessed Daniel's life. We're going to see later on. So Daniel definitely has that kind of faith. Another thing he has inside of his faith is he has courage, right? He has courage. He has courage in God's word, not to just follow the ways of the world. He really believes that, God's word is God's word, right? The law is the law. So, like I said, I'm not trying to, I don't want to look at the technicalities of the law, like, what foods and what foods not to eat. Of course, if you look at the New Testament, it's not the same, right? It's not the same. We have already, the law's already been fulfilled when it comes to faith in Jesus Christ. But what I want to look at is not the technical aspects of what Daniel is doing, but his heart, right? His heart. So he has the courage to really follow God's method and God's word, right? That whatever God's word says, I will follow, right? God's method and God's word, and then God and the faith and the courage that says God is going to provide. It's that God will not let me die, right? God will not let me die. There's the power of the world that wants to kill God's people, but saying, instead of compromising with the method of the world, still, if I'm living in the world and I still follow the method of God, then I won't die, right? I won't die. God will provide if I follow God's way, God's word. And so he puts that faith in action. And so we, often compromise like that. Like, there is a method of the world, and we have to follow the method of the world. We have to have this nice image, just like the rest of the world. We need to have the nice job, and the nice car, and the nice house, and so on and so forth. Following God it really isn't about those things, but it's following the method of God and believing that He will provide and He will guide. And we still won't look shabby, right? We still won't look shabby. I mean, if Daniel definitely looks shabby, then we are talking about the king having the head of both the official and Daniel. But Daniel has faith that if we follow God's method, then we won't even look still shabby inside of the world. And that can be hard, right? That can be hard to fathom, right? As we walk the path of faith, we think that the nice job, the nice car, the nice house is so important to live and to not die, to live and not die in this society. And you think, how are people going to look at me? Is it going to be a shabby image? Really, I felt, I kind of felt this as well too when I first, I was telling, Carlos, we moved to San Francisco here 18 years ago, and when we first moved to San Francisco, very little money, very small apartment in Chinatown with some, rickety elevator with some gate like that and a baby, right? And even when my wife was pregnant with our first son, with our baby, right? And then we had the baby, then that became 3 people, right? And so because it became 3 people, the owner got mad at us, like screamed at us, and then raised our rent, because we had 3 people instead of 2. And so, anyways, when you look at, the shabbiness that, God's people, when they're following in ministry and walking that way, it could seem easier that, I should just follow the life of the world. That, if I just, got a nicer job in Silicon Valley and do all those things, then, I wouldn't have that image. But, what does Daniel say? He says, the start may be a little bit shaky like this, but give it 10 days. Right? Give it 10 days. And that's what I want to say to all of us as well, too. For Daniel, it was 10 days. For me, who knows what it was? Maybe, I think maybe 10 years. You look 10 years later, and it was definitely different for us. Right? It was definitely different for us. I would say very clearly after 10 years, God definitely changed our life and our life situation and our family and all these kinds of things. And it really is just about trusting in God, and we have to trust in Him. Right? It may not seem, we can't see everything clearly. But, is faith that something where you see everything? That's not what faith is. If faith was you could see everything, I could see the invisible God, then that's not faith. Faith is believing in the invisible God, and faith is believing in the method of God for our life. And 10 days or 10 years or whatever that time period is, let us look at it and let us see. Right? Let us see what happens. And so let's continue on in Daniel chapter 1 and in verse 15 and 16. Daniel 1 and verse 15 and 16. At the end of 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. And so the guard took away their choice food and the wine, and they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. So they passed the test, right? And so after 10 days, right? After 10 years or after 10 whatever it is, this time period that we should walk and we should give to God. We should have courage, right? Just like Daniel, we have to have courage that, at least I can walk this kind of time period and, really pass the test. And he looks healthier and better nourished than the people eating the royal food. Something you think is impossible, right? I mean, that's like an obvious fact, actually, when you look at it. It's an obvious fact that, if you're eating like meat and if you're eating good food and then versus vegetables and whatever and so on and so forth, whatever that it's an obvious fact that the people who are eating more protein and so on and so forth are going to look stronger. But what we come to find is that that's not the case, right? So they look healthier and better nourished. This is what the Bible records about. And so, it tends to be like that for us. We think that there is the obvious method, right? That's the method of the world. That is the most obvious method, and we have to follow that. But what happens when we follow the obvious method of the world, right? We tend to just fall into the worries of the world as well also. So let's look at this in Matthew chapter 6. verse 25 through 34. Matthew chapter 6, verse 25 through 34. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the lilies of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which are here today and tomorrow is thrown in the fields, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows you need them. But first seek his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble on its own. So the clear title to this section of the Sermon on the Mount is Do Not Worry. And so, what is it that we tend to worry and worry a lot? So we pursue, so let me put it back into the framework of today's sermon. So we try to pursue the method of the world to accomplish the image of society, that society, culture, and the method of the world expects of us. But what ends up happening in that, it's that because we're relying on the world and relying on ourselves instead of relying on God, we fall into worries, right? We fall into worries about what shall we eat and what shall we drink and what shall we wear and all of these things. And we worry, and then we have stress, and then we have heartache, and then, we break our relationships with God, we break our relationships with other people, we have spiritual anxiety and stress and depression, and many, many things that come with following the method of the world. So, saying it again, the method of the world seems like it's the obvious way. That if you don't follow the method of the world, then you're going to be shabby, right? And then you've got to do that. But we fail to see how this broad road of the world leads to destruction, right? Leads to more worries, leads to all of those things. And it doesn't seem obvious, right? When it comes to the path and the method of God, the path seems very narrow, right? It seems very narrow. Like, can you really do a lot when you're living in a shabby apartment with a rickety elevator and a baby, right? And it seems very, very difficult. To get out of that, we've just got to follow the method of the world. But, really, it may seem shabby at first, but, given time, and we will see the assurance of God. God provides, God knows, and he provides. That's faith. It's faith to know the assurance of God and his glory in the end. Let me put it another way, really. Relying on the world, right, is a life of worrying with no assurance, right? There's no assurance, actually, when you look at it. All you have in the method of the world is just a life of worrying and no assurance, because what is your assurance? Your assurance is only yourself, right? Your assurance is only yourself. But how is the life of faith, relying on God? Though it doesn't seem like at the start we have a lot, but the assurance is glory, and only he can give it, right? Because we have the assurance of God. God is the assured one. So, we can live our life just worrying and being a slave to the world, and another is the assurance of God, and that's like guaranteed, right? This is guaranteed. That's what faith is. It's the guarantee of God, right? It's the guarantee of God for our life. And really, if you really take it all to the logical conclusion, in fact. So let's take the method of the world, and let's say you got everything you wanted, right? Let's say you got everything you wanted. You have all the money, fame, power, and all of that stuff, right? The stuff of the world that you think are so great. But all of us still have to appear before God in heaven. And even those people that do have it all, I can tell you, for sure, just look at the news and look at the celebrities and look at the people who have all of that. There is a life of worrying, and there is a life that still is a life of worrying. It's still a life of slavery inside of the world. And in the end, everyone still has to appear before God in heaven, right? Everyone still has to appear before God in heaven. Are you going to make the bet, that, maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe heaven doesn't exist, and we don't have to appear before God in heaven. really, I don't want to make that bet, because that is eternity. This is just our life here, and that is eternity. And he gives glory to the ones who have faith. Right? We should have faith. That is what it's all about. It's not about the things that we did on this earth, or our merits, or our deeds, but it's about faith. Right? And that's what we see inside of Daniel. Right? At this point in time, Daniel has done nothing. There's no accomplishments, really nothing. He's just refused food, really is all it is. But like I said, it's not that we want to look at the scenario of Daniel, but we want to look at the context. We want to look at his heart. Right? We want to look at his heart. And his heart, we come to see, truly has faith and is giving glory to God. And so we see that in Daniel. And let's continue on to Daniel chapter 1, and in verse 17 through 21. Daniel chapter 1 and verse 17 through 21. To these 4 men, God gave them knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them in, the chief priest presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every manner of wisdom and understanding, about which the king questioned them, he found them to 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in the whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. And so Daniel's brought into the palace, and then when it comes to all wisdom, he even is able to interpret visions and dreams better than in that era. When it talks about magicians and enchanters, those were considered the wise men of society long ago, right? Not like today. We would not consider magicians and enchanters the wise men, but it was long ago. And Daniel was considered 10 times wiser even than all of them, even by the king. The king even testified it, right? And so, so one of the things that comes out here that I want to point out is that Daniel had the ability to interpret dreams, right? And so Daniel's ability to interpret dreams is basically the focus of the next few chapters of Daniel. And I don't want to look at all the dreams and all the interpretations, but I do want to look at the first one, and that'll give us context to Daniel's interpretation. So let's look at Daniel chapter 2, from verse 36 through 49. Daniel chapter 2, from verse 36 through 49. This was a dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. You, O king, are the king of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory in your hands, and has placed mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds of the air where they live. He has made you ruler over them. You are the head of old. After you, another kingdom will rise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. As iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all others. By the way, the dream that the king had was something about bronze and iron and being crushed and so on and so forth. Just as you saw that the feet and the toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be the divided kingdom, yet will have some strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. Just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be mixture and will not be remain united, and any more than the iron mixes with clay. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all of those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it itself will endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out from the mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king that will take place in the future. The dream is true and interpretation is trustworthy. Then Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering of incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all the wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. So, basically, the king has this crazy dream, right? And they're like, what does it mean? And so you can imagine, like, there's this crazy dream that's happening with bronze and iron and clay and so on and so forth, and something out of the mountain and it crushes, and, someone presents that to you, and you might think, well, I don't know what that means. Like, what is this all supposed to mean? And so the magicians and the enchanters are saying this and that and all kinds of things. And then so finally, the king asks Daniel, can you interpret? And so Daniel gives a very clear, cohesive, comprehensible, understandable, interpretation that Nebuchadnezzar says, oh, that is true. And what is that interpretation? He is saying that the first thing, this is about Babylon, right? So Babylon is very strong, but after Babylon is going to come a kingdom. And then there's going to be another kingdom. And then there's going to be another kingdom after that. And then after all these kingdoms, but finally there's going to be a kingdom, and this kingdom is not the kingdom made by man, by man's hand, but it is the kingdom of God, right? God will set up a great kingdom that will crush all of man's kingdom, and that this will be for eternity, right? This will be for eternity. And so you understand, if you look at that interpretation of Daniel, and you see that this is biblical, right? This is what the Bible is talking about. There's going to be this kingdom and that kingdom and this nation and that nation. But the Bible speaks about the kingdom of God that is going to be given to us from God. And so Daniel's interpretation is better than what the king's advisors say. And so now we see Daniel is uplifted to the high place. He has, eaten the royal food and vegetables, not eaten the royal food and vegetables, yet he still looks healthier. He gains this wisdom and ability, and not only that, he's resurrected way higher than what he was before, right? It wasn't just like about, how his body looks, right? But he is even brought to the high place. God gives him glory beyond even what his original faith was in, right? His original faith was just something about eating, right? But here, through the faith of Daniel, through his heart, right, God lifts Daniel up to really this high place through visions and revelations like this. So when you look at our lives too, the method of our life and the method that God wants to bring our life, he wants to bring us to also this place of glory. He wants us to go to this high place. And so to go from the shabby place we are now to receive the glory of God, how are we going to reach that place? Well, it's not going to be by our own power, but we must receive wisdom from God. We must be able to receive wisdom in dreams, and we should interpret those wisdom in dreams well inside of our lives so that we can follow his will, right? And so isn't that why we come to church? We come to church exactly for that. It's so that, I can receive revelation, right? It's so that I can know what God's will is in my life. On my own, I'm just like going from here to there, and I don't know. It's hard to know, right? But, as we learn the Word of God, as we start reading the Bible, it seems like it might have something completely unrelated, right? As we start Bible study, with people too, what often happens is, I'm not so sure how this directly applies, but as you read it, you read Romans and you read the righteous who live by faith, and then it becomes more clear and more clear as life goes on and as studying the Word goes on. And so we receive this kind of wisdom, and as we receive this wisdom, it helps us gain a closer and deeper relationship with God, right? And as we do have that kind of faith, that's what faith is about. It's about learning the Word and having a closer and deeper relationship with God. And you look at those two things, like learning the Word and having a deeper and closer relationship with God, you're thinking, well, how does that help me? I'm trying to solve my car and house and all these other things I'm trying to solve. How does that directly solve? And you might think it has nothing to do with it, but this is the method of God. That if we really do learn his Word, and we do really have faith, and we come into a deeper relationship with him, he will really guide us, right? He will really guide us. And so how is it for Daniel? How was Daniel really able to interpret and to see the direction, right? When it comes to the interpretation of dreams, that's what it really means. It's to see the direction. So, that could come to us as well too, applying what is the direction? How can I interpret best, what is the direction? Well, I want to say clearly, to receive the interpretation from God, we need the Word, right? We need his love. We need a closer relationship with him. And who can really receive his Word and really receive and become closer to him? We find that the purity of heart, something so simple and something so small, is very important, right? Very important, right? And so, think about it. Like you're reading the Word, right? You're reading God's Word, right? But, really being defiled inside of the Word, inside of the world, and defiled inside of all these things. The Word really won't come to us. It'll just like come and bounce off. And that's what we're really having. But the ones who really keep pure, the Word comes very deeply. It comes planted very, very deeply inside of it. So it's not about, I want to be clear about faith. Faith is not about, I keep pure so God will give me something. Right? Some people think of it like that. It's almost like a lawful exchange. I keep pure and then God will give me something. It's not about that, right? This is what it's about. It's about the fact that Daniel here is keeping pure from the world, right? And so for the pure ones, of course the Word is going to come deeper into them. Of course, God's love and a closer relationship with God and being close to them is going to come to them. And so this greater wisdom, the interpretation, comes to that one, right? It's like a superpower. Like you're just following in the life of faith, trying to do your best to be pure. Like, no one's going to be perfect. We're going to slip and fall. We're not always going to be like 100% pure in like everything. But, we try our best. We do try our best. And as we go along with that heart, right, we come closer to God, we receive His Word, and shocking things start to come to you, like wisdom. This happened to me in the life of faith. I kind of describe the Word of God as like a superpower, right? And so I felt like as I was walking that like I'm seeing things in my life that I've never seen before about my life and about this world and about the understanding of this world. It's like a superpower, seeing hidden things I didn't see before. And so, for example, one of the things for Daniel is that it's understanding within the context of God's kingdom. That this world is going to fade away, and God's kingdom is going to come. And so when we really understand that aspect of history, then we can really interpret and see in all the craziness that is happening in the world, it becomes clearer everything that is going on. And we're not just going to fall into the decadence and the pollution of this world, but we will follow God. And so really, God, He pours down blessings really to the ones that are pure in heart, who have that heart to want to keep faith in that way. Right? And so I hope today, as we look at the story of Daniel, that we remain pure in our hearts, and that God will pour all kinds of revelations down to us. He will guide us closer to Him, and in this way, let us experience the resurrection. The Lord already carried the cross for us. Even if we are not pure, the Lord was pure and sinless, and we receive Him by faith. And we will experience the resurrection that He has given us. And so may we be these fruits of love before God, and we reveal the glory through faith. Let's pray. Father God, we thank You. Today, as we read the story of Daniel, we thank You so much for helping teach us this application to the life of faith, to keep pure, to regard Your law, Your method, more holy than the things of this world, Lord. We tend to fall into the methods of this world, we confess, Lord. And in that, we fall into worries, we fall into just many problems of the world, Lord, and we see that our image in the world conclusively just fades into the dust. But Lord, may we follow with faith and love towards You. And as we do follow with faith and love towards You, may You pour down all kinds of wisdom upon us that gets planted deeply in our hearts, and so that we can interpret Your visions and dream for us. For You wish to uplift us by the resurrection towards a glorious place. And we thank You so much for guiding us in this way. We thank You.